Paimon in the Book of Solomon, truth or myth? Have you ever wondered if that strange symbol you once saw on an old page could actually be connected to an invisible intelligence? What if I told you that one of the most powerful kings of hell, according to ancient manuscripts, not only existed in the shadows of history but is still revered in secret rituals to this day? Sounds like a movie scene, doesn't it? But the truth is, behind the name Paimon, there's far more than superstition. There's a code, a legacy, and a mystery that spans centuries. The Book of Solomon, attributed to the wisest king in the Bible, is said to be the origin of a list of 72 spiritual entities, including Paimon. But did Solomon really write this grimoire? Or are we looking at one of the greatest mystical constructions of humanity? The answer might shake your beliefs, whatever they may be, because this isn't just a video about demons or angels. It's about the difference between what you've been told and what you never dared to question. Get ready to dive into a journey where the veil between the symbolic and the literal begins to tear, where the name Paimon could be both a key to power and a mirror of your own mind. And what if it's all real? What if everything you believe to be myth is actually part of a truth they never wanted you to know? The origins of Paimon, a king among spirits. Few names stir as much discussion in occult circles as that of Paimon. A name that echoes like a distant sound from forgotten times. It carries a heavy aura, as if each syllable were soaked in centuries of mystery and power. But who exactly is this Paimon? We're not talking about just any spirit. In classical demonology, he is considered one of the most influential kings of hell, a true commander of legions. And no, this isn't horror movie fiction. It's part of a tradition spanning centuries of texts, rituals, and manuscripts that read like forbidden grimoires. He appears alongside names like Asmodeus and Baal, yet stands out for his intelligence and ability to teach occult sciences. Many view Paimon not merely as a ruler, but as a spirit of wisdom, one who doesn't just command, but reveals. So the question remains, where does this king come from? In the oldest records of Western magic, the kind you won't find in just any library, there were already mentions of a majestic being, riding a camel and surrounded by celestial musicians. And it's not just a dramatic image, it carries deep symbolism. The music and the mount suggest royalty, control over the senses and mastery of the path. Some manuscripts suggest Paimon came from the Middle East, with roots intertwined with ancient Arab and Persian traditions, where contact with jinns and spiritual entities was common. This would explain the ceremonial style of his evocation, involving chants and specific gestures. He was later absorbed into Western tradition, especially through European occult literature. In other words, the European Paimon might just be an adapted version of a much older entity, which makes you wonder how many ancient names were camouflaged by newer cultures. In the world of demonology, he holds a high throne, and that's not just a figure of speech. Texts say he is one of the 9 kings of hell, directly subordinate to Lucifer. That alone shows the level of prestige he holds in that realm. What's interesting is that, unlike the traditional Christian view of the ultimate evil demon, Paimon is often described as someone who teaches, reveals, and guides. In serious rituals, he's invoked by those seeking deep wisdom, knowledge of languages, occult sciences, and even secrets of others. Sounds like a movie, right? But think about it. How many people today are desperate for answers, for control, for power? No wonder figures like him are still sought after today, in grimoires, esoteric forums, or ceremonial magic practices. If you look closely, the way Paimon is portrayed aligns with a recurring archetype. The kingmaster, the ruler who knows more than he shows, one who tests before he teaches. And that image appears across many cultures. Take Krishna, Odin, or even Solomon, all in some way represented spiritual power tied to knowledge. And here's something few notice. Perhaps Paimon was never a demon in the popular sense of the word. Maybe he was turned into one over the centuries, out of fear or ignorance. Ever notice how everything that escapes human control is quickly labeled evil? It's a recurring pattern in human history. Paimon's figure might just be the tip of the iceberg of an ancient wisdom that was labeled dangerous. simply because it gave too much power to those bold enough to seek it. A practical example? Many modern magicians, the serious ones, not TikTok amateurs, report that Paimon's invocations are not terrifying, but enlightening. They use ancient methods inspired by the Goetia, manifestation triangles, specific seals, and divine names to balance the ritual. It's a dense practice, full of protocols, requiring study, preparation, and a clear purpose. And here's the curious part. Most aren't looking for evil power, but clarity of thought, guidance for projects, answers for difficult decisions. That changes the perspective, doesn't it? The demonized figure becomes, in truth, a symbolic or even energetic tool for self-discovery. But to get there, one must know how to separate folklore from real ritual practice. In ancient texts, especially those of the Goetic tradition, there are detailed descriptions of how Paimon manifests. With a hoarse, commanding voice, always demanding respect. This is no joke. It's not something to attempt lightly or without knowledge. He arrives preceded by sounds, often drums, signaling that his arrival is never subtle. That ties directly into how ancient cultures understood spirituality, as a force of sound and vibration, even before being visual. And here's something fascinating, this same logic is echoed in modern quantum physics, which speaks of frequency and vibration as the foundation of reality. See how, when you start connecting the dots, the puzzle begins to take shape? It's as if ancient knowledge was ahead of its time. Or maybe it's not so ancient after all. And for those who think this is just about dusty old texts, just take a look at today's serious initiatic orders and esoteric schools. Paimon is still studied, debated, and yes, even invoked, though with a more symbolic than literal approach. It's as if he represents a living symbol of everything that's hidden, yet available to those brave enough to dig deep. And that's where the real mystery begins. Because the more you learn about Paimon, the more he escapes easy definitions. Like a king guarding the key to something far greater, a key he only gives to those who know how to ask the right question. And that key, my friend, might open doors you didn't even know existed. The legacy of the Book of Solomon, truth or legend. When it comes to ceremonial magic, it's impossible not to stumble upon the name of Solomon. Not just the wise king from biblical tales, but a figure who, according to many grimoires, once commanded spirits using magical rings and seals of power. Among these writings, one stands out, the Lemegeton Clavicula Salomonis, or simply the Book of Solomon. And here's where the provocation begins. Was this book truly written by him? Or are we looking at a later creation, adorned with the name of a legendary king to give it authority? That question hangs in the air like an ancient mist. The book, or rather, the collection divided into 5 parts, became one of the most influential works in Western magic. And that's no small feat. It's still studied, copied, and invoked today. Literally. The first section of the Lemegeton, the infamous Ars Goetia, is where the names of 72 spirits, including Paimon, take form through seals and commands. Each entity comes with descriptions, attributes, and specific instructions for invocation. But think about it. Who would place in the hands of any curious reader a manual supposedly capable of commanding spiritual beings? Sounds insane. And yet, that's the point. The book wasn't meant for just anyone. It was actually a code, filled with symbols, analogies, and layered references. To understand it, one needed to know Latin, astrology, angelology, and possess an enormous dose of ritual discipline. It's not something you read like a bedtime story, and it's precisely this complexity that raises questions about its true authorship. Historically, the Lemegeton appears in manuscripts from the 17th century. That's a strong indication that, contrary to what many believe, it wasn't written during the time of King Solomon. At best, it was inspired by legends and oral traditions associated with his name. It's as if Renaissance occultists took a powerful myth and used it as a foundation to compile centuries of magical practices. Makes sense, right? The name Solomon lends credibility, reverence, and mystery. After all, we're talking about a king who, according to rabbinic traditions, commanded demons to build the Temple of Jerusalem. And that makes us wonder, how much of the myth was intentionally crafted to protect the real knowledge? Now, while the authorship may be questionable, the content is nothing short of impressive. The details, the entity descriptions, the protection rituals, the methods of spirit communication show a level of ritual precision that doesn't seem to have appeared out of nowhere. This leads some scholars to suggest that the Lemegeton is actually a compilation of practices that circulated within secret orders since antiquity, a kind of field manual for experienced magicians. Others see the book as metaphorical, each spirit representing an aspect of the human unconscious, and the rituals as a path to self-mastery. A more modern interpretation, of course, but a valid one, especially now that occultism is being rediscovered through a psychological lens. And here's a practical example. People who studied the Goetia seriously, like Franz Bardon or even Aleister Crowley, never treated it as mere superstition. On the contrary, they used these texts as the foundation for their mystical and spiritual practices. Crowley, for instance, saw the spirits of the Goetia as internal reflections, archetypal forces to be mastered in the pursuit of self-knowledge. In his view, the ritual wasn't an external invocation, but a summoning of the soul itself. That changes everything, doesn't it? What was once seen as sorcery becomes personal development, disguised as ritual. In this context, the Book of Solomon becomes a journey of transformation. But be careful. This isn't about romanticizing the grimoire or treating it like mystical self-help. It's a dense text, filled with heavy symbolism, and it demands respect. The language, the seals, the angelic names, everything is meticulously placed to create a field of force, whether literal, symbolic, or vibrational, depending on the reader's belief. That's why it's often said, don't study the Lemegeton out of curiosity. Study it with purpose. It's a book that tests those who open it. It doesn't hand out secrets easily. It demands deep study, patience, and above all, serious discipline. And maybe that's exactly what makes it so special. It separates the curious from the true seekers. And even if you decide never to open such a grimoire, just understanding its origin and the debate around its authenticity already shifts your view of occultism. Nothing in it is accidental. Nothing was placed there by chance. The Book of Solomon is a bridge between myth and practice. And by crossing that bridge, many discover that the spiritual or symbolic world is not something outside of us, but something that flows through us, silently, every day. And in that silence, other names emerge, other symbols shine, and among them stands Paimon, playing his own role within this vast coded universe. Paimon in the Ars Goetia roles, symbols, and invocation. Within the first part of the Lemegeton, known as the Ars Goetia, Paimon stands out, not just as one of the 72 spirits, but as one of the most respected and powerful kings among them. The ancient grimoires spare no detail in describing him. He appears riding a dromedary, crowned like a true sovereign, surrounded by spirits playing wind instruments. It doesn't sound like a horror scene. It feels more like the triumphant entrance of a celestial emperor. And that's no coincidence. Ancient magicians believed that the grandeur of a spirit's manifestation reflected its power. With Paimon, everything is grand, ceremonial, and impactful. He does not appear casually. He demands preparation, respect, and an attitude of reverence. Now, what exactly does he do? What are his functions? According to the Ars Goetia, Paimon is a master of all sciences, occult arts, philosophies, and the hidden secrets of heaven and earth. Yes, he is described as a spirit of deep knowledge, one who whispers to the bold things that no one else can know. He can also reveal hidden truths, influence kings, commanders, and people of power. Can you imagine using that force to win critical negotiations, make strategic decisions, or even understand invisible patterns in your relationships? We're not talking about cheap witchcraft here. We're talking about a force that, when harnessed properly, can drastically expand the perception of those seeking wisdom beyond the obvious. And that brings us to a crucial point. Symbols. Every serious magician knows you can't just summon Paimon by saying his name. You need to use his specific seal, a circular image with unique curves and lines, carrying his energetic signature. This seal must be drawn with precision and activated during the ritual, typically inside a magical circle that protects the practitioner. The goal is to create a communication field, where the spirit can manifest safely. Traditional grimoires also recommend invoking divine names. Yes, you read that right, to balance the energy and maintain control during the ritual. Classical occultism always sought this duality, calling the darkness, but under the protection of light. Another detail often ignored: astral timing. The Ars Goetia notes that certain spirits respond better on specific days and hours, influenced by planetary alignments. Paimon, as a king, holds special power when the sun is strong or when Jupiter is in ascendance, since both represent leadership and expansion. This leads to an interesting point: invocation rituals are a dance between the mystical and the cosmic, where even the position of the planets matters. Now you can see why magicians often took years, sometimes decades, to master these rites. Today, many people ignore these details, which is why the results never come. To work with forces like Paimon, you need method and respect. And speaking of method, it's important to understand that contact with Paimon is not just about candles and seals. It's a pact of focus, presence, and intention. Many occultists report that, when invoked with honesty and purpose, he sends messages through dreams, visions, and synchronicities in daily life. In other words, the spirit doesn't manifest like in the movies, smashing walls or flickering lights. He communicates more like an invisible mentor, sometimes silent, but always present. One example: a seeker reported that after a ritual with Paimon, they began to understand complex mathematical concepts they had never grasped before. Coincidence? Maybe. But for those who live the occult, coincidence is just the name we give to what we don't yet understand. The invocation of Paimon is, and always has been, no game. It requires mental, emotional, and spiritual preparation. You must be centered, focused, and crystal clear about what you want, and why you want it. This is not something to attempt out of mere curiosity because you saw it on TikTok. That kind of approach opens the wrong doors, and often attracts the exact opposite of what you're seeking. The key is intention. Those who seek knowledge, clarity, inner advancement may find in Paimon a demanding but powerful guide. Those who seek spectacle lose themselves in ego. And the most fascinating part? This logic applies to life itself. Everything you pursue without preparation tends to control you. But what you seek with purpose transforms you. To invoke Paimon is, in truth, to invoke a part of yourself that craves more. And once the ritual ends, the real work begins. The messages, the signs, the intuitions, they don't come with subtitles. You must stay alert, let go of control, and observe the invisible. Paimon doesn't deliver spoon-fed answers, he provokes better questions. And that's what makes his role in the Ars Goetia so unique. He's not just a spirit who serves, he's a master who tests. A king who gives but demands posture. And perhaps that's why so many fear him or admire him. Because deep down, every great teacher acts this way. He gives gold only to those who know how to carry it. But what if we saw these rituals as gateways, connections between the world within and the world beyond? Then, yes, other names start to make sense. Modern influence, from ancient manuscripts to pop culture. It's curious how entities that once appeared only in grimoires hidden behind locked library doors are now splashed across movie posters, featured in viral videos, and even inspiring video game characters. Paimon is one of the clearest examples of this. Once a spiritual king in occult traditions, he has now been transformed into a near-folkloric figure in pop culture. But the real question is, what has modern media actually understood about Paimon? Do the portrayals we see on screen do justice to the complexity of the spirit? Or are we witnessing an aesthetic distortion designed to shock and entertain? Spoiler, most of the time it's just a caricature, a shadow of what truly hides behind that ancient name. The most famous case, of course, is the film Hereditary, which placed Paimon at the center of a dark and disturbing plot. In the movie, he is portrayed as a manipulative demon whose secret cult involves sacrifice, possession, and a cursed spiritual inheritance. And while the film is a brilliant psychological thriller, it coats Paimon in a Hollywood layer that has nothing to do with the classical texts. No celestial music, no hidden teachings, just horror and screaming. This created a distorted image, making many people immediately associate Paimon with demonic possession, like some B-movie villain. But anyone who has studied the Ars Goetia in depth knows Paimon is more mentor than monster, and it doesn't stop there. Games like Genshin Impact, wildly popular among younger audiences, also use the name Paimon, but in a completely different way. In the game, Paimon is a small, cheerful, talkative guide, almost like a fairy. The contrast couldn't be more dramatic. From infernal king to lovable mascot. This shows how the name, completely disconnected from its original essence, has been repurposed for narrative and commercial use. And to be clear, that's not inherently a problem. Pop culture is built on appropriation. The real issue arises when audiences take these simplified versions as truth. And then, any serious research becomes a joke. You study Paimon? Like from the game. And just like that, all depth goes down the drain. But this cultural appropriation also has a silver lining. And here's an insight few consider. When ancient names like Paimon resurface, even in distorted form, they awaken curiosity. People who would never open a book on occultism begin to search. And those who search eventually stumble upon truth. It's as if pop culture is reactivating ancient archetypes, even if just on the surface, and opening doors to deeper inquiry. Many, for instance, watched Hereditary and then went on to read about demonology. And in that process, they didn't find horror, they found symbolism. They discovered that Paimon doesn't represent destruction, but revelation. And that's exactly why, today, we're seeing a growing movement of modern occultists, content creators, artists, and even therapists working to recover the original image of entities like Paimon. Instead of fear, they seek understanding. Instead of ignorance, investigation. Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube are filled with people reinterpreting these symbols with more maturity. Of course, there's a fair share of charlatanism that's inevitable, but the positive side is that knowledge, once accessible only to an esoteric elite, is now within reach for anyone. With responsibility and study, one can navigate these waters without drowning. And those with eyes to see will realize that pop culture may just be the beginning of the path. This movement of reclaiming symbols also touches on something important: the power that ancient names still hold over the collective unconscious. Jungian psychoanalysis already taught us archetypes never die. They just change costumes. Today's Paimon might be a digital character, but he still carries the symbolic force of the wise king who reveals mysteries. And once that is understood, it can be used to awaken talents, transform beliefs, and access the deepest parts of ourselves. There's no need to invoke with seals or stand in magic circles, necessarily. Sometimes, simply understanding what that archetype represents is enough to begin real transformation. It's the symbol in action, invisible but present. And if pop culture only shows us the surface, then it's up to us to peel back the skin and taste what's inside. Because the truth is, somewhere between the horror of Hereditary and the cuteness of Genshin, there lies a third path, the path of knowledge. On this path, Paimon is neither a villain nor a mascot, but a challenge. A figure who invites us to look beyond the veil of appearances and seek what few have the courage to face. The wisdom hidden behind fear. And once you accept that invitation, new questions begin to arise, including one that echoes like an ancestral whisper. Is Paimon truly real, or is all of this just one great metaphor? Hidden truth or symbolic allegory? We've reached a crossroads, one that even divides the most serious students of occultism. Is Paimon a literal entity with will and conscious spiritual existence, or merely a symbolic construct, a powerful archetype of the human mind? The answer, as frustrating as it may sound, is it depends on who's asking. Because in the realm of spirituality, everything is filtered through perception. To some, Paimon is a real being with presence, energy, and awareness. To others, he is the personification of a concept. Hidden knowledge, spiritual authority, dangerous wisdom. And here's the twist. Both views don't cancel each other out. They complement one another. It's like trying to define fire. Is it light or is it heat? Many modern occultists see the spirits of the Goetia as internal facets, deep layers of the unconscious that, when accessed, can unlock abilities, memories, or forgotten insights. To invoke Paimon, in this view, is to activate a mental mode of heightened clarity, strategic thinking, and persuasive power. Those who take this concept seriously report real effects. Brilliant ideas appearing out of nowhere, a sudden ease in learning complex subjects, even shifts in social behavior. But make no mistake, it's not enough to say his name and expect a miracle. The process demands concentration, study, and a ritual, even if symbolic, of clear intent. Because a symbol only acts when the mind believes and surrenders to it. On the other hand, there are those who claim to have felt, seen, and even spoken with Paimon in a direct and objective way. Yes, reports of spiritual apparitions, voices, and lucid dreams are common among advanced practitioners. And surprisingly, these manifestations are not usually frightening, they're instructive. Paimon, in such cases, appears as a stern but just teacher, a spirit who tests but also guides. One example, a serious seeker once told me that after a cycle of meditations focused on Paimon, they began developing sharp logical reasoning and grasping philosophical concepts that once seemed unreachable. Coincidence? Maybe, but the result was real. And most importantly, there was no pact, no sacrifice, no theatrics, only focus, silence, and study. What we need to understand is that the symbolic universe operates with the same strength as the physical one. Jung spoke of this. When you activate an archetype through imagination, meditation, or ritual, you change your mental frequency. And the mind, my friend, governs everything. If Paimon represents deep wisdom, then to invoke him, even symbolically, is an inner call to become more conscious, more strategic, more aligned with the essence of hidden knowledge. And you know what? That's already magic. Magic isn't about making things fly. It's about transforming your inner world so powerfully that it begins to shape your outer one. When you understand this, the name Paimon stops being taboo and becomes a key. Now, for the skeptics, the idea that it's all a metaphor is far more comfortable. They see grimoires as mythological literature, rituals as symbolic theater, and spirits as projections of the psyche. And there's nothing wrong with that. As long as the practice is done with respect, it can work, even without literal belief. The human mind responds to ritual. It doesn't matter if you believe in a spirit or an unconscious force. Repetition, focus, symbolism, all of that rewires the brain. And that alone is enough to produce real, visible changes. How many religions, philosophies, and therapies are built on this principle? The world changes when the mind changes. And symbols are tools for that transformation. But what if it's all real? What if Paimon truly is an independent spirit with his own consciousness, dwelling in a realm science hasn't yet reached? What if invocations do open portals to other realities? That possibility can't be dismissed, especially considering the historical accounts, the repeating patterns, and the real-life impact these entities have on those who dare to call them. The problem is, our culture demands absolute answers, while occultism thrives on paradoxes. And the paradox here is simple. Paimon can be both symbolic and real, because in the spiritual world, truth is not binary. It is expansive, fluid, ever-shifting. That's where the power lies. In the end, the real question isn't whether Paimon exists, but how he acts within you. Is he a symbol of deep wisdom or a literal master? An inner call or an external force? That's for you to decide. Because the true secret is not in the seal or the name or even the ritual. It's in the impact it has on your life. If it transforms you, elevates you, and strengthens you, then it is real. And maybe that search for truth, hidden or symbolic, is what brought you here. But if you think the story ends now, you're mistaken. Because Paimon is only one name, and the Book of Solomon, it still holds many others. Paimon in the Book of Solomon, truth or myth? And now that you know all of this, will you simply close this video and go on with your life as if nothing ever happened? Or will you use this knowledge to start seeing the world through different eyes? Because this isn't just about demons in ancient grimoires. It's about hidden power. And power, my friend, you either learn to master it, or you'll be ruled by it without even realizing. What would you do if you had access to ancient wisdom, the kind that could change how you think, how you act, how you make decisions? Would you have the courage to explore this unknown territory? Or would you rather stay on the surface, believing only what you've been told? You don't need to invoke Paimon to begin. You only need to invoke the will to understand within yourself. And if his name is nothing more than a metaphor, good, because every powerful metaphor is a tool for real transformation. So tell me, what part of this video shocked you the most? What idea have you never stopped to consider before? Drop a comment below. I want to know what moves you, what unsettles you, what makes you question everything. This channel is for those who want to go deep, not for those who settle for the obvious. So hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because in the next videos, we'll keep digging into what's hidden, and you won't want to miss it.